Welcome to meeting number 28, House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. Today we have with us Canada Post. We were originally going to be discussing C-15, but of course, as everyone's aware, the parties made a deal without involving OGO, and they settled some of the C-15 issues. But seeing as we'd already had a commitment for Canada Post to show up, and we're doing the supplementary estimate Cs, we're going to move over to the sub-Cs discussion, as well as any other discussions that you might have for Canada Post. Welcome, Ms. Crissom. I understand you've got an opening statement. The floor is yours for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président et chers membres.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thank you for inviting Canada Post to appear today. My name is Carrie Chisholm, and I am the Vice President of Product Management and Customer Experience at Canada Post. I'm pleased to participate in today's discussion on Bill C-15 and the government's additional repayable funding as it relates to Canada Post. And I look forward to answering members' questions.
Pleased with the government's new proposal to amend Bill C-15 to include language that protects free material for people who are blind or partially sighted, as well as reduced rates for eligible library materials. I would like to reaffirm that Canada Post had no plans to change these services. These are long-standing commitments that we will continue to honor and are very proud to do so. Today, I'm here to focus on the provision in the bill, should it pass, that provides Canada Post with greater flexibility on the ability to update its established regulated letter mail rate setting process. This would only apply to regulated letter mail items and does not include parcels or direct marketing services. It is a change that we have long advocated for and would help us address our substantial financial challenges. Over the last 20 years, the mail industry has completely transformed. In 2006, we delivered almost 5.5 billion letters. Today, we deliver half of those volumes. Meanwhile, the number of addresses we deliver continues to grow. The result is that the revenue that we earn from letter mail no longer covers the cost to deliver it, which has significantly compounded our financial issues. Since 2018, Canada Post has incurred more than $5.5 billion in operating losses. Last year, we required an initial $1 billion cash injection from the government to simply stay afloat. However, the funding was insufficient, largely due to ongoing labor uncertainty throughout 2025 and its impacts on our revenue. Earlier this month, the government informed Canada Post that additional repayable funding up to $1.01 billion would be made available to ensure the corporation can maintain its solvency and continue to serve Canadians with the reliable postal service they depend on. We recognize the severity of our financial situation. That despite these challenges, the problems facing Canada Post are fixable. Having reached tentative agreements with our largest union in December, and with the government's decision to lift some regulatory and policy barriers, we can start to turn a corner. Amending the letter mail pricing process can play a key role in this turnaround. As proposed in Bill C-15, greater flexibility over the letter mail pricing process would enable us to align our mail business with the modern needs of Canadians. This would mean the service of delivering letters could better cover its own costs and reduce the need for taxpayer support. In addition, a more streamlined process would significantly cut red tape. For example, today it takes upwards to 9 months to adjust the pricing. It's a cumbersome process that exacts a heavy administrative toll on multiple government departments, decision makers, and agencies. These are all reasons why changing this process was amongst the list of recommendations in the Industrial Inquiry Commission report. And it's also why we've included it in our transformation plan, which is currently under review by the government. We welcome parameters when it comes to changing the pricing process, and we fully support checks and balances. We know Canadians and Canadian businesses are facing rising costs. We recognize that prices must be fair and continue to provide good value. So we are looking forward and working with the government to create a clear process that would ensure transparency, proper notifications to all stakeholders, and evidence-based justification for any increases. Pour conclure, comme vous le savez, Post Canada a un double mandat.
In closing, as you know, Canada Post has a dual mandate to deliver to all Canadian addresses while remaining financially self-sustainable. Every change that we are making is about getting back to this mandate and ensuring that postal service remains accessible and affordable for everyone. Thank you again to the committee, and I would be pleased to take your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We'll start with Mr. Patzer, please, for 6.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Canada Post, for joining us virtually today. I just wanted to start this conversation off here. One of my towns back in the riding that I represent sent me a concern that they had. They received a check for Canada Post utilities through UPS via a company in Utah. Now, I'm just curious, is that a standard practice that you guys do for paying utility bills to towns that lease out buildings to Canada Post?
I'm afraid, actually, I don't have any details on that. I'd be happy to take that away and look into it, but I'm not familiar with that situation.
Okay, the company is Conservice out of Utah, and they're apparently a third-party utility payment system. And yeah, I just found it really ironic that Canada Post would be sending payment through UPS, through an American service to Canada for goods for a Crown Corporation to another level of government. I just found that quite ironic.
Okay, I've made a note of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, when it comes to rural post offices, now we've heard that lifting the moratorium will not affect rural areas, but what is Canada Post doing to make sure that rural post offices will still remain open?
So, as was announced in September of last year, the minister has provided some direction to us in terms of where we can lessen regulatory and policy burden, one of them being the rural moratorium, as you called out. From our postal network, the rural moratorium was put in place in 1994, and it was meant to protect rural post offices at the time, but it's remained unchanged for over 3 decades. And since that time, the country has shifted from villages that have become towns, towns that are cities, cities that have moved into full-grown sort of areas, and the needs of Canadians have changed. So our proposed plan that is currently still in discussion with the government does include modernization of our post offices to better reflect where Canadians live and shop. We understand, of course, that how important it is the rural, remote, and Indigenous communities play. And modernization will have to truly prioritize and protect access to vital services in these areas. As I mentioned, this is part of the proposed plan that we've submitted to the government and we're in discussion with, but we won't be able to share final details of that until it's fully endorsed and approved.
Okay, so while the moratorium was in place, though, like there were over 500 rural post offices that did close. Now, I do recognize that part of the lifting of this moratorium is, yeah, like you said, for places where they've changed from a village all the way up to a city, and that, of course, I understand the reasons why you're doing that. However, I'm looking more at some of the towns who are very rural and remote, who rely on postal service for sending in, say, water samples on a weekly basis to make sure that their residents are drinking clean water. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of concern from folks that it's those kind of post offices that are going to end up on the chopping block. So I'm just wondering if you can just provide to this committee assurances that your plan actually will ensure that places like the town of Vanguard, for example, will not lose, or even the village of Neville will not lose their post offices because of a strategy like this.
So a significant part of our transformation plan, once it's endorsed and approved by the government, would be in part of consultations with those municipalities that we would be engaging with, whether that be from a retail network or community mailboxes. So that has to be taken into clear consideration in terms of each one of the municipalities, the services that the post offices offer, and the needs of the community. So consultation is at the forefront of everything that would be part of our transformation plan to ensure that we're making sure that we are looking at it from an approach that fits the community. It can't be one size fits all. Each community is too unique to look at it in such a way.
Has the minister given you a very clear definition of what rural means for the sake of determining what a rural post office would be?
From my perspective, from my position, I have not been engaging with those specific conversations, so I can't comment as to whether or not they've given us a specific definition. It's better to ask that question directly to them.
Okay, well, we're still waiting for confirmation of when he'll show up to this committee again. But what does Canada Post, I guess, then for you guys then? Do you have your own definition that you utilize when you are referring to something as rural?
So the definition, as far as I understand from my current point of view, really does root itself back into the rural moratorium, which is partly why it needs to be relooked at as it regards to our statistical data for Canada, as opposed to sort of where the boundaries were drawn in 1994.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you for that. 30 seconds? Okay. Just wondering if you could just... do you have any specific details of your plan for keeping rural post offices open? Do you have any information on that you could table with this committee just to provide some further assurances, or just wondering if there's any information that you'd like to share further to this committee? If so, you could send that as a brief.
Yeah, at this time, though, our transformation plan hasn't been approved, so we still continue to work with the government to be able to make sure it's there. But I do want to reassure this committee that, of course, we do recognize the vital role that rural and remote communities play, and will be part of how we approach this transformation very carefully from a municipal perspective.
Thank you.
Thanks. We'll go to Mr. Gasparo, but before we do, Ms. Chisholm, we do have a policy within the committee. Any information we require back within 21 days, calendar days.
Thank you for letting me know.
Mr. Gasparo,
Thank you for letting me
floor is yours.
Thank you. There's been significant discussion at this committee by myself and others regarding the preferred rate postage for two specific groups, municipal libraries and blind Canadians. Can you just confirm what others have confirmed, whether the intention is to maintain these preferential rates and exemptions for libraries and Canadians who are blind?
Yes. So yesterday there was a decision that those provisions within Bill C-15 would be removed. As I mentioned in my opening statements, those services, regardless of how Bill C-15 would have been shaped with literature for the blind included or reduced rates for library mail, it would have been a service that Canada Post would have continued to offer. They're both longstanding services, and we're completely proud to offer them and would have continued to do so.
Excellent, and I know people in my riding of Eglinton Lawrence are going to be very happy to hear that. I also know many Canadians are worried about the future of Canada Post's service. In your estimation, what services at Canada Post should be prioritized?
Can you specify what you mean by services? I'm assuming delivery services is what you're referring to.
And you know, as a follow-up on the services that Canada Post provides, what do you see Canada Post looking like in 2050, 2075? Basically, where I'm going with this is, where do you see Canada Post moving forward in the 21st century?
I would just say that, it's important to remind everybody that we do have a dual mandate, and that is to continue to service and deliver to all Canadians, and we are very proud of the mandate. We also have the flip side, which of course is to remain financially self-sustaining, which is why we've been working very closely with the government to submit a transformation plan that showcases how we can return to financial sustainability so that we're not reliant on taxpayer funding. The components of the transformation plan are very much tied to the minister's announcement in September of last year, related to the areas where we've got an opportunity to change some of the regulatory and policy pieces that have potentially made it more difficult for us to be able to transform. That is still the root of what the transformation plan is and does include all of our products and services from a delivery perspective, including parcels, letter mail, and direct marketing services. It also speaks to where those services would be offered in terms of our retail outlets or other areas to make sure that communities are accessible and they're able to transact with us in different ways. The details of the transformation plan, as I mentioned, are still under review and in discussion with the government. So I'm not able to go into the specifics of them, but did want to rest assured that they do tie very closely to what was announced in September of last year.
So I'm glad you referenced the mandate to serve all Canadians. Why is that mandate still relevant in today's digital economy?
To serve from a perspective of why is it still relevant, we are a national infrastructure that doesn't only just deliver letter mail. We also deliver direct marketing services, which allows small businesses and large business to be able to promote themselves and to be able to grow their own businesses. Of course, we also offer parcel delivery from coast to coast, and I'm sure we all have personal experiences of the growth of e-commerce during the pandemic, as well as preferences of people just moving to online. We are built nationally to be able to service all Canadians from coast to coast to coast on all of our products and services. So it's still important that we continue to do that, and it's relevant to all of the products that we offer, not just letter mail. It needs to be there for what you need to get, and whether you're a consumer, a small business, or whether you're a larger commercial customer, it's still important that we're able to service from a national perspective.
How much time, Chair? Oh, good. What steps are Canada Post taking to focus on efficiency and reduce the executive team to ensure the organization is positioned to lead us into a more sustainable and modern future?
Yeah. So one of the things that's important, right, is to return to financial self-sustainability is looking at all aspects of the corporation. The announcement from the minister back in September really spoke to the cost of operations in terms of how can we be more efficient and effective with our current network. That is a key part of it for sure in terms of what we need to be able to do. As we also move forward with the transformation plan, we need to be able to make sure that we're looking at all different levels of the organization to be reflective of how we're transforming and how we need to be able to move forward. And that's critical. We've also got a large number of positions where attrition will come into play over the next 5 and 10 years that gives us an opportunity to look at it. Specifically from a management perspective, as we move forward with our transformation, we have eliminated some executive and management positions as part of just corporate-wide restructurings in order to better set ourselves up. As our transformation plan continues to be reviewed, that continuous review of how we're structured to make sure that we're right-sizing the organization to support how we're transforming is critically important. We also understand that's in line with the government's expectations of us to make the changes to the leadership and changes within the corporation to modernize and to transform.
I'm glad you mentioned right. Okay.
Madame Gaudreault, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I will continue in this line of questioning. When it comes to attrition, then, I'm wondering whether your clients have brought up a concern about what might happen and what will happen when it comes to reducing your staffing, given your transformation plan, and have you heard tell of any worries or discontent? Thank you for your question, and I will respond in English with your permission.
As I mentioned, in terms of having the dual mandate of delivering to all Canadian addresses as well as remaining financially self-sustaining, we have to look at our transformation plan as a holistic component of how we're evaluating our service, how we're designing products and services, as well as our network to support all Canadians coast to coast, but then also how the organization needs to be structured to support that as things are changing. I personally am not aware of any direct discussions around the concerns about the size of our organization or how we're right-sizing. But in my position, I just may not be privy to those conversations.
Merci. Comment se fait-il?
Thank you. How is it that it's taking so long, that we have for so long been talking about getting to a result? I mean, people are wondering, will my post office survive? Will its work change? Will it be there on a different basis? Will we have sufficient and effective infrastructure, including the community mailboxes, those that are of specific sizes? I think they're called, extra large boxes, right? But why is it taking so long to get up to date? This is already the month of March.
Merci pour votre question.
Thank you for your question.
Was made in September 2025 with respect to the areas that we've gotten a little bit more flexibility to look at our transformation plan. As I already noted, we did respond in November of last year with a transformation plan that addresses what was announced in September, as well as areas that we also need to look at and evaluate to make sure we've got a transformation that brings us to being financially self-sustaining. The conversations with the government are ongoing on the transformation plan. We have not yet finalized that plan or had it approved, so I'm not able to speak to the detailed components of it outside of what was announced by the minister. But it is something that we do continue to work very closely with the government on. To this day, to make sure that we're able to do that. I would like to address your comment about people having concerns. It's very important for us from a transformation perspective that once the elements are approved, municipal consultations will be extremely key before we move forward. It's not simply that we would just moving forward and having the plan approved and start actioning any changes. Consultation will be key. Community by community is different, and we can't just have a blanket approach to how we're doing this. So consultations will be a very strong fundamental of our transformation plan going forward.
Ça me rassure d'entendre que...
That's reassuring. It's nice to hear this is not going to be the same approach applied across the board, but will be, tailor-made based on need. This week, I'm going to go to Les Îles de la Madeleine, and I am convinced that the community there will say, will there be a change to, let's say, the frequency of delivery services? I wouldn't say that they're concerned that the services will come to an end. That's the sort of thing that was asked in the past, although moving to a private market might change everything. But you're reassuring me that, and indeed reassure me again, that it's always going to be a priority to deliver medical, let's say, packages and so on to remote areas such as Les Îles de la Madeleine.
Merci.
Thank you.
I think that if you're speaking to your constituents is for them to understand is, in addition to talking about how important community and municipal engagement is overall with the transformation plan, it's also that once the transformation plan is approved, it will be something that the details are made much more public to Canadians, our customers, and our employees once everything is finalized. I think that would be a significant, place for people to start once those details are there, and before, of course, we begin municipal engagement. So I think that's just critically important for people to understand and for you to be able to share with your constituents that the plan will be, made public once it's approved. And then there, of course, will be that municipal engagement process that I mentioned, between not only retail, but also community mailboxes, etc.
Une dernière question, il me reste quelques secondes.
One final question in the few seconds left to me. What are the requests or comments, the main ones, that you're juggling about Canada Post services? Let's say accessibility, community mailboxes. What really stands out from your clients?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for your question.
Where we have had a lot of questions come up is around how will we make sure that community mailboxes remain accessible to Canadians? And we have been speaking quite a bit about our delivery accommodation program that was launched in 2014 to make sure that it can assist people to have access to their mail. And that's been a big one that's come up. So we've been speaking quite more frequently about the delivery accommodation program to bring better awareness to it in case people aren't familiar with it. Again, has been around since 2014, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people understand the specifics and that it, includes many different aspects of it, which could mean, moving a compartment lower, could mean adding a tray for better accessibility, adding Braille to the box to make it easier for somebody who needs it to be, in addition to, providing, if necessary, mail and parcels to the door.
Thanks very much.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Gill, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witness for appearing. As per the Kaplan report, Canada Post is deemed to be in an existential crisis and is effectively insolvent. Page 55 of the report states that, quote, the notion that the January 2025 $1 billion plus loan, effectively a lifeline, will be repaid requires the complete suspension of disbelief, unquote. Now that another loan has been issued, what confidence can Canadians reasonably have that either of the loans will be repaid? Do you have any timelines of when the loan is going to be repaid? How long will it take to repay the $2 billion? And can you table the loan agreement with this committee?
Thank you for the question. So yes, Canada Post as well as CUPW did participate, of course, in the Industrial Inquiry Commission that was led by William Kaplan in 2025. We did absolutely welcome the findings that came from the Kaplan report as it highlighted our financial situation and the dire need to make changes to Canada Post to allow us to be able to transform. Following just actually while the Kaplan Commission was going on, the first announcement of the $1.1 billion cash injection was brought forward in January of 2025. That, of course, was meant to sustain the corporation until the end of the fiscal year, March 31st, 2026. Unfortunately, due to the ongoing labor uncertainty in 2025 and the impacts on its revenue, a secondary announcement was just made regarding an additional access to up to $1.01 billion was just made. As you know, we have stated, as well as the minister has stated, these are repayable loans where we as a corporation do not want to continue to be reliant on taxpayer funding and be supported by taxpayer funding. We do need to return to financial sustainability, which is, of course, part of our mandate before we're able to do that. I am not privy to the details of both of those cash injections that have come through and cannot speak to the terms in which there would be repayment of them.
Okay. Can you table the loan agreement with this committee?
I can certainly take it away and ask my colleagues and ask them that. I just don't have the details. I'm sorry.
Okay. So what are you doing differently that is going to make Canada Post sustainable or profitable, if I could go as far as thinking that? And what is or when is the transformational plan being implemented? It's been months and we're all waiting. When are the community mailboxes being rolled out as per the new plan? Or is that the new plan?
So as I mentioned earlier, the announcement in September from our minister with respect to areas that they would lessen the regulatory and policy items that have been in place for some time that directly aligned with the Kaplan report in terms of community mailboxes, of course, our retail network, delivery standards for letter mail, the rate setting process for regulated letter mail that I mentioned in my opening statements. All of those are components of the transformation plan that were submitted to the government last year as per requested. We continue to have conversations with the government regarding the specifics of the plan and the details that are in there. We do not have a timeline at this point because it is not yet approved with respect to when we would commence the transformation initiatives. We need to make sure that the transformation plan is approved by the government, and we need to make sure that we're then starting the announcement and any kind of consultation processes with the communities. So I do not have a timeline to share with you because that's still part of discussions in the transformation plan overall.
Can you share those discussions with us? Because we're kind of curious as to what exactly is holding up the implementation of this plan. And the minister has had it, as you just pointed out, for several months.
So I'm the Vice President of Product Management and Customer Experience. I am not privy to those direct conversations. So I could not tell you what is being asked or what details are being asked for clarification from from our plan. I'm just not privy to those conversations.
Is that my time, sir?
It's your time.
Thank you.
Ms. Rushworth, please.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Puis, merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much to our witness. I have only 3 questions to put to you, Ms. Carrie Chisholm. First, I know that a good deal has been said about preferential rates provided to 2 groups, the libraries and blind and partially sighted Canadians. Could you please confirm your intentions or the intentions regarding this? I know how essential and important those services are to them. Let's begin there. Thank you for your question.
Yes, thank you very much. As I mentioned in my opening statement, Canada Post was, happy to hear that Bill C-15 and there's a change that's being proposed to remove literature for the blind, as well as reduced postage, for library mailings. Regardless of whether or not those provisions would have been included in Bill C-15, Canada Post would have continued to honor those services. They're longstanding traditions that we have been doing for some time. 1898 as it relates to literature for the blind, and 1939 as it relates to reduced postage for library mailings. So we're very proud to honor those services, and we had no intention on making any changes to them.
Merci beaucoup. Ma deuxième question.
My second question, it picks up on questions put earlier about rural community services. In my riding, many of the communities are in rural areas. My own village, Sawville, where we're very lucky to have a wonderful post office. Could you please go over with us how you will ensure that you will continue to provide adequate service to rural areas across the country?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you.
In terms of, again, we have 2 sides of our mandate, which is to remain financially sustainable, and of course, is to making sure that we're still delivering to every address in Canada. Part of the national service and infrastructure that we currently have set up for Canadians includes retail post offices and making sure that people have access to their post offices and the services within them. Rural and remote and Indigenous communities are a significant part of our Canadian economy, and they are an important part of the modernization that will need to take place as part of how we will need to transform to be financially sustainable. As I mentioned, once the plan is approved, it is important that the plan is then made available to Canadians so they understand what it means. And then we will also make sure that we're looking at engaging with and prioritizing to protect the vital services in our rural, remote, and Indigenous communities as we go forward.
Et peut-être juste un dernier commentaire concernant
And perhaps a final comment about how you will guarantee services to people who have mobility restrictions, the elderly. I know that this is a population in ridings that have expressed their concern. Thank you for your question.
As I mentioned, we do have a delivery accommodation program which has been around since 2014. It may not be completely well known, although we're very, very proud of it and certainly have been speaking a lot more to it to bring better awareness of the program and what it contains. The intention of the program is to make sure that, of course, mail, direct marketing, and parcels remain accessible to all Canadians. The program is a free program. It currently has 17,000 Canadians that are registered as part of it. However, it is something that does naturally ebb and flow, and we have had up to 40,000 Canadians' addresses being a part of it in the past. Because when I say ebb and flow, it's something where even we offer seasonal options where perhaps an individual would prefer during the winter months to be looking at something because they're concerned about accessing their mailbox because of snow or ice. And, it does offer a variety of different options depending on what people's needs are. So that is certainly for us a program that we're extremely proud of and a program that will be underpinning a lot of the transformation plan to make sure that there's an awareness and an understanding of how can you apply for the program, what options are available, because different options could service different needs for people, and we want to make sure that it's not one size fits all. So that is something that you'll continue to hear a lot from us about, and again, something that we are quite proud of. As again, it's available. It's been available for some time, and it continues to remain available today.
Oh, merci pour cette réponse. Et c'est
Thank
tout
you for
pour-
your answer. And this completes my questioning, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to kind of pick up on something here. When it comes to the transformation plan, has the minister given you a timeline for when he will approve your plan? Do you know when that is?
I haven't been part of those direct conversations in my position in terms of providing a timeline. I can tell you that the conversations are ongoing in terms of being able to ask questions, but a specific timeline I'm not aware of, but I'm not part of the direct conversations with the minister's office.
So, I mean, if you guys already had an approved strategic plan, I mean, how much money could you guys have really saved?
Well, it's a multi-year plan. So it's not something that the transformation plan would be multi-year. If you think back to what was announced in September with respect to some of the items we've talked today, so community mailboxes, of course, our rural retail network, changing our delivery standards for letter mail, the regulated rate process, all of those things will take time. They're not instantaneous. We do need to make sure that there aren't any impacts to Canadians and that we're going through a consultation process. But it certainly wouldn't be that if it was approved tomorrow, that we would return to financial sustainability by the end of 2026.
Strategic plan that was submitted, I think, like 5 years ago and wasn't approved, and it's just kind of been sitting there in the background, kind of on the back burner. So my point is that if a strategic plan would have been approved when it was submitted 5 years ago, do you think it's possible that you wouldn't be in as big of a mess as you are today?
I can't comment on the elements of the strategic plan that were submitted 5 years ago. I think there's a lot of compounding factors as it relates to our financial situation. And I think that, between the Commissioner Kaplan's report as well as the announcement by the minister in September, these are ways that Canada Post can really start to turn a corner and to change from the financial position that we're currently in, while still being able to stick to, of course, our mandate with respect to delivering to every Canadian address, as well as making sure that we're returning to financial sustainability.
So, I mean, what factors then do you, in your opinion, have had the biggest impact on you in the last couple of years to make you be $750 million in the hole year over year?
As I mentioned at the beginning, our network is designed to be a national network, and it's designed to deliver. It was predominantly designed at the beginning of it to be able to deliver letter mail. Since in 2006, we delivered 5.5 million letters. Today, we've delivering less than half of that. On average, people typically only get 2 letter mail pieces in their mail a week compared to 7 20 years ago. So if you have a national network that's been built for that, and then We just don't have the volume to be able to cover the cost of those networks. Things need to be able to change. Some of the elements of the September announcement with respect to even moving our delivery standards so that it's no longer required to be 2, 3, 4 days, and moving it to a wider date range, 3 days to 7 days as an example, that something like that would allow us to move from having to transport letter mail in the air to be able to mate the network, which in itself would be a cost to the operational saving. So it's a combination of those things that will really help be able to move us forward. But again, having a national network that was designed for letter mail with less than half of what we used to have is just a challenge.
So that's not a change that you can just make on the fly, then, is what you're saying. Like, or the organization has refused to make that change on the fly.
The transformation plan is a multi-year plan, and it does include multiple different things. It's not a one-part piece. It really is tied to the different elements that were announced by the minister, as well as supported in the Kaplan report. But it's not something that we can get approval on and proceed with and an in-year change to our financial position. We need to be able to make sure that we're consulting with Canadians and we're engaging with the municipalities that are impacted in moving towards implementing the changes to return ourselves to financial sustainability.
Thank you.
Ms. Khalid.
Thank you, Chair. I believe Mr. Osborne has more questions than I do. I'll take whatever remaining time that he allows me.
And that's your time, Mr. Osborne. Well, now, go ahead, please, for 5, Mr. Osborne.
Perfect. Just a couple of questions. I understand that the volume of mail has gone down over the last 20 years. We understand that, and we understand why with, greater reliance on email and so on and so on. But parcel delivery, and I know it's a competitive sector, why has the private sector been able to grow in that area? And Canada Post has gone from 62% in 2019 to 24% in 2024.
Thank you for the question. So parcel delivery is a competitive business, as you highlighted. It is something that we do continue as part of our mandate to deliver parcels to all Canadian addresses. We are the sole carrier that actually can claim to deliver to all addresses in Canada. Our competitors do not. Prior to the pandemic, we had a substantial market share, as you noted, but everything from an e-commerce perspective drastically changed during the pandemic. People who weren't used to, of course, ordering and transacting online had no other options. So the volume of e-commerce that became available in parcels, that became, of course, available during that time, the traditional carriers, so ourselves, as well as the competitors that were in the market in 2020, there's now been such a significant number of smaller entrants that have come into the market because of the just volume that has been made available, that has changed things quite drastically. Our model is quite different than some of our the non-traditional carriers. It's very different. So we have, of course, full-time employees that are offered benefits compared to some of the non-traditionals where it's a bit more of a contracted model, and they are more of a third-party contractor than direct employees. So that has been a substantial change just overall in the industry. Is the number of entrants of what I would call sort of non-traditional carriers. That's why you'd see such a shift. Obviously, one of the things that, of course, was highlighted in the industrial inquiry report and was part of our ongoing discussions and negotiations with our union last year was around the need to expand into weekend delivery. Basically the entire e-commerce industry is 7 days a week, and we need to be able to move into that. And so that was obviously one of the findings as well in the industrial inquiry report around making sure that we are aligning our services to those of the market so that we don't continue to miss out on the opportunities for parcels and packets.
Outside of the 5-day-a-week delivery versus 7-day, and I get that. I mean, if some of the people you contract with want delivery 7 days a week, it would have an impact. Outside of that, what else is Canada Post doing to gain a greater market share of parcel delivery, which is where the future is? Some of your competitors did not see the decrease that Canada Post did over that time frame.
Yes, I would say that, it's from a parcels perspective, certainly the labor uncertainty last year did have a significant impact with our commercial customers, as I mentioned, and it did impact our revenues that came in. It was the uncertainty that came in and made it difficult for them. So there were some that did, of course, go to other carriers, and they're able to do so to make sure that they felt that they could still continue to move their businesses. We do have definitely plans, and they are incorporated in the transformation plans around the opportunity that we see possible to grow our parcels business and to sort of win back our customers in there.
One final question, and there was a comment made of Canada Post that instead of rationalizing your footprint, you continue to carry 1990s era infrastructure into a 2025 economy. Can you provide some comment on that?
We do have quite I'm not sure I'm going to do this question justice. I'm sorry, just from my vantage point, from a product management perspective, we do have quite a large footprint to be able to serve nationally in terms of having, 20 processing plants and a number of depots and things like that. We did bring a brand new processing plant in Scarborough called Albert Jackson Processing Plant online that has significant capacity to deliver e-commerce for us. So, at its peak, it can do up to 1 million packages a day, I believe. So we have still continued to invest in the network where we need to make sure that we are able to grow in the competitive businesses. But I'm not able to address specifically the comment around the rest of our infrastructure. I'm just don't have the knowledge or the details.
That is our time. Sorry. Ms. Chrysostom, I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind, for yourself. Mr. Ettinger, when he was last with us, stated that it was solely up to Canada Post to make decisions on what is rural, non-rural, because we've been banding this about for a long time. Examples of Gatineau being declared for 93 rural. Canada Post has therefore had more than enough time. Mr. Ettinger said Canada Post can decide, so why the ongoing delay, and why every time we ask a question as done today, we heard, well, it was set in 1993. Canada Post has the power. What's it waiting for in addressing this?
So that's I wasn't aware that we had the power to set within it. My understanding was within the boundaries of the, within the rural moratorium and what was sort of decreed, compared to where we have an opportunity, which I'm not sure if that's what Mr. Ettinger was speaking to be able to sort of reimagine and revision.
So I'm going to just interrupt. I'm going to interrupt. I'm sorry. I'm going to be a bit mean here. You're getting into a bit of deputy minister word salad here. When are we actually going to see action then? It's been $2 billion taxpayers are going to write off, because taxpayers are not going to see that money, and there's no real change. Questions have been put forward quite fairly straightforward to you, but it doesn't sound like Canada Post is going to change or adjust. Is that perhaps something Mr. Ettinger should answer for us, or?
I think the challenge is in terms of the timing is not something that I can answer at this time, because it is part of our transformation plan. So I can't give you a specific timeline of when we will start to move forward.
But you are here on the supplementary Cs where Canada Post is getting an extra $1 billion. Can I ask, do you know what the cost of the new collective agreement will be per year if it's accepted?
I don't have that specific number available, but we can certainly respond back and provide the details to the committee.
Okay. Thank you very much for appearing with us. We appreciate your time. Sorry, Mrs. Block?
I'm not sure if we are done with the rounds. I assume so, since
yes, we are.
Okay. You mentioned that we were dealing with the sub-Cs, obviously. a few things changed in the last few days with the notice of meeting. On that note, I'm wondering, when do the subsies have to be reported back to the House? What's the specific date of that?
I don't have the exact date. I think it depends on the
3 sitting days prior to the last
Yeah.
opposition day.
3 sitting days prior to the last oppo day, supply day, but we don't know when that will be from the
Don't know when
government.
that will be. Okay. What I'm wondering is, do we have the minister for PSPC and the minister, the president of the Treasury Board, appearing here to speak to the supplementary estimates before we run out of time?
Yes, I was going to address that at the end, but I'll just address it now. Mr. Lightbound will not be making himself available. We've offered, the clerk and I have offered him our sitting days, our regular days for this meeting. He was not available, so we reached out and said we will make a special meeting on a Monday or Wednesday or Friday to accommodate him. And unfortunately, they've come back saying they will not be meeting with us at any time available. The President of the Treasury Board has made himself available on the 26th, which will be after they're deemed reported. The subs are deemed reported in the House.
So thank you for those answers. I guess I would just register my disappointment for sure with the fact that Minister Lightbound is refusing to appear before committee to defend the supplementary estimates. I would also register that it I think smacks in the face of parliamentary procedure to have a minister appear on supplementary estimates after they've been deemed reported. I think we would like to have the opportunity to question minister prior to, and so this is unacceptable, really, to the parliamentarians around this table, that we have ministers refusing to come in a timely manner to defend the estimates. Thanks.
Yep. Yes. No, we have Ms. Gaudreau, then yourself. But Ms. Crisson, we're going to excuse you. We'll let you go. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
No. To your point, I agree regarding Minister Lightbound, which is why, I'm sorry, let me finish, please, and then it's Ms. Gaudreau, then yourself. I agree, which is why the clerk and I reached out to make any time available to March. The clerk and I were meeting yesterday, and we've actually we'll reach out again to the president of the Treasury Board to see if he can come. I think we have time on the 12th and 14th. We will reach, sorry, the 10th. We'll reach out to try and find time to see if he will shift his appearance before they're actually deemed reported. Madame Gaudreau, and then Ms. Khalid.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, je voulais simplement...
Yes, Mr. Chair. I would simply like to reiterate pretty much what we have just experienced here, being that there has been a conclusion, let's say, about the blind and free library delivery services, and then we receive our witness before us here. That's all very fine and good, but regarding the budget and the estimates, of course, one doesn't meet with someone after it's in and accepted. So, you know, when we ask, of course, for officials and ministers to come in person, but if they're truly unavailable in person, they could be heard by video conference. The aim is to really be able to speak to them before the ultimate date.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to let everybody know that the reason why Minister Lightbound is not available to come to committee is because he is having a new baby and he's on paternity leave. It's not that he's refused to attend. I know for a fact, and I've had many conversations with the minister, that he is very, very attentive to what this committee has to say and what this committee has to contribute. He is not refusing. He just is otherwise occupied. I know that the president of the Treasury Board is more than willing and able to come and attend and answer any questions of the committee. And I'm more than happy to connect with Minister Lightbound to see if a virtual option is available or if there's any other ways that we can engage. But I do appreciate if we can all stop saying that the minister refused to attend, because that's not the case at all.
Well, it would be wonderful if the President of the Treasury Board would reconsider his date to make it earlier, but as said, the clerk is already on that. Regard to the minister, whatever term you wish to use, he's not intending to defend the estimates. There is $1 billion just in Canada Post. We heard today repeatedly, well, there's no real plan on actually addressing it. There's lots of others. So it'd be wonderful if he is able to attend by virtual for 1 hour. Madam.
Thank you, Chair. I think that there is a difference. When we accuse somebody of refusing, that to me and to anybody that's listening or paying attention to what's happening in committee, it shows that they are actively not wanting to come to this committee. In this instance, the minister has not refused to attend. It is that he is otherwise preoccupied with his family and with his new baby. And I would appreciate if we do be a little bit more careful with the language that we use and what we accuse our ministers of doing or not doing. I'm sure that they are all trying their level best, and quite frankly, I'm not in any position to defend anybody. I just want to make sure that we are being accurate in how we portray people and their intentions.
Your point is taken, and I think it's up to the committee to decide what language or what interpretation they will of Minister Lightbound's inability to join us. But we take your point. Ms. Block, and then we'll suspend. Once we're done, we'll suspend quickly, bring in our new witnesses, and I think we have to do a sound check on someone as well.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I would have hoped that information would have been provided to the clerk and to the chair, so that we, not that we need to know all the personal information of someone, but that would have explained a lot. In this instance, is someone taking on the responsibilities of the Minister for PSPC while he is on paternity leave? Just a question. I know it happens when other ministers take maternity leave, so wondering if this is a prolonged period of time and if that's been given any thought.
Okay, we'll get back. Ms. Rochford, then we'll suspend. Go ahead.
Oh, just for the record, myself, I am satisfied that the minister appeared, I think, twice and gave very...
But this is on the supplements, something completely different.
Nonetheless, he was present and gave us an opportunity to question him on so many issues and options that might have evolved, and so I'm satisfied with that excellent presentations that he's made. Thank you.
Thanks. I am not satisfied. There's $1 billion in Canada Post. We've heard Canada Post's inability to send anyone who can provide any responses, and it's also traditional ministers. It's part of Parliament tradition. Ministers show up to defend their estimates. We understand Ms. Khalid will reach out to see if we can get at least 1 hour virtual, which I think will satisfy our requirements, but appreciate feedback. Go ahead.
Say on the record that the minister has appeared 3 times in the past 2 months.
I would also just like to put on the record he has not appeared for the Sup Bs either, so he has avoided what the parliamentary tradition of this place actually is.
Now we're getting into argument back and forth. I think our points have been made. We're going to suspend for about 5 minutes. We will do a test for one of our witnesses, and then we will reconvene. 5 minutes, please. Our witnesses are from the Canada Transport Safety Board. Mr. Marier, I understand you have a 5-minute statement. Before you start, I just want to pay tribute to your predecessor. Ms. Fox was with us quite a few times over the years. A fantastic representative for your department. Although I'm sure you'll do wonderful. We do miss her, and we want to just say thanks. I'm sure she's watching from home right now on CPAC. But just a sincere thanks from our committee to the work that Ms. Fox did. Please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the committee for inviting the Transportation Safety Board of Canada to be present today. I am joined by my colleagues Melanie Scott, Chief Operating Officer, and James Clarking, Director General of Corporate Services. The TSB was created in 1990 by the Canadian Transportation Accident Investigation and Safety Board Act, referred to as the CATSB Act. Our mandate and sole purpose is to advance safety in the air, marine, pipeline, and rail modes of transportation under federal jurisdiction. We achieve this by conducting investigations, identifying safety deficiencies, and making recommendations to prevent future accidents. We also communicate important safety issues to Canadians through our reports and outreach activities. The TSB is independent and operates at arm's length from government departments and agencies, reporting directly to Parliament through the President of the King's Privy Council for Canada. This independence ensures impartiality and freedom from external influence. We are neither a regulator nor a court, and we do not assign fault or determine civil or criminal liability. We have one clear role: to improve transportation safety. In doing so, we play an essential role in protecting lives and ensuring public safety across Canada's transportation system. Depuis sa création en 1990, le
Since
BST a
its
mené plus de
inception
2000...
in 1990, the TSB has completed more than 2,000 investigations, more than 630 recommendations, and issued hundreds of safety communications. We learn new lessons from each investigation, which improves our commitment to improving safety in Canada. Over the years, more than 84% of responses to the board's recommendations have been assessed as fully satisfactory, showing that we have a real effect on safety.
Risks remain. In October 2025, we released the latest edition of the TSB Watch List, which highlights 7 systemic safety issues that continue to put Canadians at risk. These are not isolated problems. They are long-standing, deeply rooted challenges that have appeared in investigation after investigation across sectors and across the country. The watch list is both a warning and a roadmap. It shows where action is urgently needed, where progress has stalled, and where sustained leadership from regulators and industry can prevent future tragedies. We will continue to keep these issues in the national spotlight until levels of risk have been measurably reduced. Meeting those challenges requires the right tools, expertise, and infrastructure for the future. This is why we are preparing for the new Transportation Safety and Technology Science Hub at the National Research Council campus in Ottawa. Cette installation à la fine pointe de la technologie permettra une
This state-of-the-art facility will allow for stronger collaboration, equip us with cutting-edge tools, and enhance our ability to conduct rigorous investigations.
Complexity and public impact of our work continues to grow. In 2025 alone, there were 3,851 occurrences reported to the TSB. Currently, we are managing 86 active investigations nationwide, including the investigation into the highly publicized implosion of the Titan submersible during its descent to the Titanic, and also the investigation into the overturning of a Bombardier aircraft after it struck the runway while landing at Toronto Airport. We also continue to support hundreds of investigations led by our international counterparts, including the recently released investigation report into a helicopter that struck a passenger aircraft last year in Washington. And we also lead investigations into international occurrences, such as the September 2025 incident in St. Martin, in which a WestJet aircraft right landing gear collapsed on touchdown. Collectively, these investigations, both domestic and international, reflect the global attention and scrutiny on transportation safety and the increasing technical complexity of our work. Depuis notre création, nous avons mené des enquêtes.
Since our inception, we've delivered high-quality investigations, but the risk profile is shifting. Canada's landscape has changed dramatically since we were established. Public expectation for clear, easily accessible safety information has grown. Technology has advanced at an unprecedented pace, making our investigations more complex, and emerging fields are appearing on our radar more frequently.
Potential for accidents, vast amounts of data requiring deeper analysis, and responsibilities that didn't exist when the CATSB Act was introduced. All of this makes our role more critical than ever. The TSB is lean and efficient. With just 233 employees and a total budget of approximately $40 million, we currently fulfill or mandate effectively, but we operate with very limited flexibility. This means we can remain agile under normal circumstances, but we are operating with a thin margin. Il est essentiel d'avoir la capacité de suivre le
It's
rythme.
essential to have the capacity to keep pace with rapid innovation, emerging risks, and the growing expertise required to address them.
Fulfill its mandate with independence, professionalism, and a deep commitment to public safety. We are proud of the work we've accomplished and the trust Canadians place in us, and of the TSB's standing as a world-recognized organization and respected international partner. But as transportation evolves and new challenges emerge, we must ensure that TSB remains ready and resilient so we can continue to protect the safety of all Canadians today and into the future. Thank you. We are prepared to answer your questions.
Thanks very much. We'll start with Mr. Patzer, please, for 6.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much and for joining us here today. I look forward to this meeting. I'm always been very intrigued by the Titan submersible, so I mean I look forward to reading the report when that one is finished, because that's something that really I think drew the national and international media attention for sure. So, but I don't want to ask you any questions specific to that one. I do have a few questions on short line railways. I have quite a few short lines that operate in my riding, and I asked them a couple of them separately about issues that were impacting them that would be relevant maybe to this meeting. And one of the things that they both came up with unprompted was the issue around the watch lists and how short line rails are viewed and treated the same as the Class 1 railways. So given that the short lines operate at slower speeds and quite often with significantly shorter and smaller trains, just wondering, is there any way for Transport Canada or for you guys to maybe acknowledge the difference between the short lines and the Class 1 railways?
So in the case of rail investigations, the vast majority of the investigations that we conduct involve, as you mentioned, the Class 1 railways. So the short lines are a very small proportion of the investigative work that we do. However, when we develop the watch list, currently the only rail-specific issue that is on our watch list is the issue of crews not following signal indications. So we look at the overall risk, which is why, and this risk we've identified it for the rail sector. So we've decided not to exclude short line and just really point to the overall risk. But when we do take another look at the watch list in the near future, it could be something to think about for sure.
Yeah, maybe just something to consider. And I think just generally talking about the public safety issues that impact the Class 1s, it definitely has an impact on the short line guys. And sometimes it makes it a little bit harder and more onerous for them to do their job because they just don't operate at the same capacity. But also they are reinvesting a significant, as a percentage, I guess, significantly more back into the track to make sure that they have a high quality track to operate on, and even at that, they're still operating at lesser speeds. Just kind of wondering, when you work on the watch list recommendations, do you take the consideration of trying to avoid any unintended consequences or perhaps maybe over-regulation in a sense, just, finding that right balance, I guess, right? I mean, obviously there's regulation that's required, but how do we find that right balance of not being too onerous in our regulations? What does that look like for you?
It's tricky work for sure to find the right balance, as you mentioned. So the watch list is really the key safety issues that need to be addressed to make Canada's transportation system even safer. And it is really a combination of recommendations that we have issued throughout the years, as well as data from our investigations and feedback we are receiving when we discuss with industry stakeholders. So we collect all of that, and then we identify the key issues. And so when we develop the watch list, it's really we really try to strike the right language to identify the issue without sending to alarmists, because our goal is really to make these issues actionable. We want them to be action in the future so that change can be advanced, and for that, we have to strike the right balance for sure.
Okay, thank you for that. When it comes, you mentioned, excuse me, in your opening remarks, the lean and efficient nature of your department, how you operate. Thank you very much for being efficient with taxpayers' dollars. But when it comes to the CERs, I'm just wondering, is there any risk of your department having funding cut or maybe some positions lost due to the comprehensive expenditure review?
Chair, I can take that. Thank you for the question. Under SIR, we advanced a number of initiatives that we feel are just working smarter, and that's basically, excuse me, using new AI to become more efficient and stuff on our operational side. Right now, we do feel that we'll be able to improve our service, make our inspections more efficient, and investigations more efficient. However, we don't see that we'll have to lose any technical capacity in the future.
Okay, so you guys are not going to be receiving any cuts to funding or to staff at this point in time?
We are receiving cuts, and it's potential that in the future we may reduce administratively on internal services, but right now we don't foresee it.
Okay, are there any potential concerns, though, about maintaining transportation safety as it pertains to that, though, or?
Our mandate, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, is really to conduct investigations, identify safety deficiencies, and make recommendations. And we are able to fulfill our mandate without any issues. So, as James mentioned, we are faced with some cuts as part of the SIR exercise. These cuts do not compromise our mandate. We will be able to fulfill our mandate with these cuts. Right now, we're really focusing on finding efficiencies, managing vacant positions, and potentially attrition as well. So it's really what we're focusing on to meet these cuts as part of SIR.
Okay, that's good. Thanks, Mr. Osborne.
Thank you. You answered one of my questions, and that is around finding efficiency. So I won't go down that avenue. I want to start by recognizing the good work that the Transportation Safety Board do, and the reputation that you've gained on an international basis. So while some of my questions may seem like they are challenging, it is not to be offensive to your positive reputation and the good work you do. I want to ask, in your opening remarks, you talked about advancements, and it almost seems contradictory. So I just kind of need to get my mind around, with these advancements come new risks, greater potential for accidents. I would think that with advancements there would be less potential for accidents. Can you elaborate on your comment?
So, what I was talking about was emerging technologies, new things that are appearing on the radar. And I can give you a few examples to clarify. Drones, space flight, composite materials. These are all things that we have been having to deal with, and that are coming more and more through our investigations. And we have to develop our own internal capacity to be able to meet these new areas that we now have to investigate. So that requires ongoing work for us to stay up to date, stay current, and keep up to date with how to conduct these investigations. So this is what I was referring to.
Okay. You talk about the risk profile shifting, and Canada's transportation landscape has changed dramatically. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
So the public expectations for fast and accessible information have grown. It's something we definitely noticed in the occurrence that happened in Toronto in February 2025, where the interest in our investigation was so high that it made our website crash. So the how we are communicating information, how we are conducting these investigations, it is shifting. Our mandate is not shifting, of course, but it's really how we are addressing these investigations that can shift based on public expectations, new technologies that we are seeing.
Okay. The other question: after years of recommendations from the board and supposedly better technology, shouldn't we be seeing a reduction in the number of occurrences that you have to investigate? Why is it we're not seeing that reduction?
So, over the years, as I mentioned, we have issued 630 recommendations, and out of that, about 84% have been addressed as fully satisfactory. We are closing recommendations as fully satisfactory every year, which shows that we are having a concrete impact. But the way people are traveling is also changing regularly. There can be higher volumes in some sectors, and of course, higher volumes means that more accidents, which means that we have to investigate more. So there can be a shift in volumes, and we don't have a lot of control over that, of course. So we really focus on flagging the safety deficiencies that come out of our investigations for them to be addressed.
You mentioned that you continue to support hundreds of investigations led by international counterparts. Are we seeing a reciprocal, an equal number of investigations where international counterparts are helping us?
Yeah. So under the International Civil Aviation Organization, Annex 13, which is basically the international convention that governs international investigations on the air side. I'm really talking mostly about air investigations. There are some agreements between the countries. So, for instance, Canada has a lot of manufacturers and a lot of operators that are based out of Canada. So, if a Canadian-made aircraft has an issue in another country, the country will be leading the investigation, and Canada, as the state of manufacturer, for example, just giving an example, will be supporting the investigation. So this is what I'm talking about. And yes, it's reciprocal, absolutely. If something happens in Canada and it's an American manufacturer, we'll be working with the NTSB on these types of issues, for sure.
So the Washington aircraft was a Canadian-made aircraft, or the Washington?
Exactly. It's why we were involved in that one, and we were working with the NTSB, yes.
The 84% of responses, so the 16 that you haven't received, can you elaborate on how old some of that 16% is? What sectors stand out in that 16%? And I guess what can be done to get a more timely response from some of the...
That 16% is in a total of 81 recommendations. So I can give you some numbers. So that's 44 recommendations in air, 23 in marine, and 14 in rail, which are still outstanding. And they can be outstanding for various reasons. Some of them are very recent, and they just didn't have the time to be addressed yet. And some of them are much older, and they are still outstanding because our assessment of the risks is not the same as the risk assessment of the regulator. And there is essentially a disagreement on how to address the issue, which means that the regulator does not address the issue and the recommendation remains outstanding. So there can be many reasons for that. Yeah.
Thanks very much. We'll go to Mr. Bachelot-Duval. Welcome to OGO, sir. The floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the Bureau for being with us here today. I would like to begin by putting a question, the board for being here with us. The accident that took place in the 12th of January in 2026, or 2023 actually, the Via Rail train, which hit 2 trucks, which had been parked very close to the rail line. It seemed that one of the drivers was actually sleeping in their truck when the accident took place. My first question for you then, how long until we get the report from Canadian Transportation Accident Investigation and Safety Board? Where are you on this, on the Transportation Safety Board's report? Well, I'll have to check. The accident was evaluated over a number of weeks and very recently was classified, so I should check before giving you the up-to-date information, and I could certainly provide the committee with that information with the details that I'm able to provide you with. I know that transport safety went there, and I also know that once you're on a site, the TSB, there's a kind of a preliminary investigation that takes place, but then the in-depth investigation is decided on later. Did you look in depth at that issue? Yes, we sent investigators to the site of an accident, and these investigators evaluate a preliminary evaluation, if you wish, the circumstances of the accident. They use that information to classify the accident. The classification goes from Class 2, which is a very serious accident leading to an in-depth investigation, such, say, the train that overturned after striking the runway in Toronto. That's a Class 2. A Class 3, then, is a sort of a regular 30-page report. It takes about a year and a half. Class 4 is a more summary report, about 10 pages, factual information about the accident. And Class 5 is simply a data collation for statistical purposes. So the investigators go to the site and then they decide on which way to go. Your questions about classification, and I can get back to you about it. Yes, indeed, it would be helpful to know how that was classified and how long until we get results, of course, based on the level of classification, I understand. On that would depend the level of investigation. Another question then about that. The low-cost drivers, the Trucker Inc. drivers exploited who don't necessarily have the necessary training to drive their trucks. This has hit the media now in Quebec and across the country, really. Very concerning. A number of accidents are linked to this. Your expertise is in railways, marine traffic, air traffic. When there's an intersection between rail traffic and road traffic, do you have an expertise in that area so that you can go in depth into the road aspect? Do you have other levels of expertise, or do you have other colleagues with that expertise who work with you? You're right. We don't have a mandate to carry out investigations about cars, trucks, and road accidents. However, we do have a mandate for any rail accident. In this case, there was a truck and a rail transport device involved, so we could investigate that. But of course, that was based on our mandate to investigate railway accidents. But it can have a component involving a road accident because there was a truck involved in this case. A few years ago, there was a collision between a bus and a train in Ottawa, and we carried out an investigation that led to recommendations about bus transportation because, in our opinion, there was an issue there. All right. So the question I'm getting at here is that do you think that you will be investigating sufficiently the road aspect, given that your mandate is mostly for the rail transport aspect, that's your expertise, because it is thought that the company involved in that accident has been involved in other serious accidents, leading even to one death, I believe. So the question is, given that people know which company it is, at least out in the field, and they wonder whether the Transportation Safety Board will investigate the road aspect of this. And, you know, that company, I can't say anything about how far that investigation goes, given that investigation is managed by the investigation directors for each mode of transportation. So I do take good note, nevertheless, of these points, and I will bring them to the person at issue. Okay. I know that I have very little time. Perhaps, Mr. Chair, we could keep the rest of my time and add it to the next round. Will you do that for me? Yes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for attending. We have seen some recurring issues that you've identified: fatigue, airport runway incursions, commercial fishing vessels stability, rail-grade crossing collisions, which is an issue that you've identified, that we have identified decades ago, and collisions still keep happening. So when the same contributing factors appear across multiple investigations year after year, what does that tell you about implementation or the oversight gaps?
So when we conduct an investigation, our goal is to identify what happened, but more importantly, why it happened. And then from that, we can identify the safety deficiencies, which is, you know, what went wrong, and make recommendations to improve transportation safety. When we issue a recommendation, most of the recommendations that we issue are targeted at Transport Canada, so the Department of Transport. We can issue recommendations to other entities, but in practice, most of them are addressed at Transport Canada. And we follow up with the department every year to make sure that that action is being taken, and all of these assessments of our recommendations are made public. So it is our way to keep the pressure on and make sure that the change is happening and that these deficiencies are fixed.
Is the compliance voluntary, or is there any consequences for them not complying? Because, for instance, the rail grade crossing collisions that take many lives every year, that's been going on for over 20 years that you made those, or your department has made those recommendations. Why is it still happening? Who is dropping the ball?
We don't have the power to force change. We can only identify the issues and then make recommendations for them to improve. After that, the implementation of recommendations is dependent on who the recommendation was targeted to. As I mentioned, most of the recommendations we issue are targeted at Transport Canada, and we do follow up with them every year to.
Would it be worth our while to give you those legislative changes so that you can enforce and demand accountability?
Well, right now, our mandate to do these investigations ensures that we are independent, and being independent is essential to our mandate because it allows us to look at the big picture and look at the work of the regulator, look at the work of all the other entities in an independent manner, and this is why we are able to sometimes be critical of the implementation of some safety measures when it's not going at the speed that we wish it was going at. So I would say that right now our mandate is adequate for our purposes, which is to conduct independent investigations and then make recommendations.
But you have many recommendations that are still sitting on the shelves that have not been implemented. Roughly, there's 81 recommendations that have not been implemented since 1990. Why? Why have they not been executed or implemented and finished?
Yeah. So there can be many reasons. As I mentioned earlier, so these 81 recommendations, 44 are in air, 23 in marine, 14 in rail. Some of them are very recent. For instance, in marine, we have 3 recommendations that are less than a year old. So, of course, for these recommendations, they are too recent for change to be put into place. But it is true that some recommendations are very old. We have 6 recommendations in air that are more than 20 years old, for example. And so for these recommendations, oftentimes the issue is that our assessment of the risks and of the way to resolve the safety deficiency is different than the assessment of the Department of Transport. So we have a different perspective on the issue and how to fix it. In some cases, we're also waiting for regulatory amendments. And as we all know, the regulatory amendment process can take time. So in some cases, we have been waiting, year after year for these regulatory changes to be implemented.
Would it be fair for me to say that the folks that should be accountable to Canadians are not being accountable and not being responsible in implementing these recommendations that you have put forth?
As I mentioned, all of our recommendations assessments are made public. So this is already really to identify the risks and to keep the pressure on the regulators, on the stakeholders to make sure that change is happening.
It appears the pressure is not working. Sorry, Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Gasparo, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both for coming, and thank you for your service. Maybe we can just take a quick step back. And can you provide a brief overview of the investigative process, please?
Absolutely. So the first step is for our investigators. Well, the first step is the occurrence report. So there is an occurrence. An occurrence can be an accident or an incident. And so there is a list of accidents and incidents that have to be reported to us under regulation. So operators are obligated to report that to us. So there is an occurrence report that we receive. Based on that information, then the investigating team, which is usually an investigator, his or her manager, will decide whether to deploy to the accident site. Once they deploy, they will assess the occurrence and decide which type of investigation to conduct. As I mentioned earlier, it can be a class 2 for a very complex investigation, all the way to a class 5, which would be basically just a collection of data for statistical purposes. So they will assess this, and then based on the classification, the investigation will start. So the first step is the field phase. So they will collect information about all of the wreckage. They will interview witnesses. They will discuss with manufacturers. Then there is the analysis phase, which is basically to identify not what happened, but why it happened. So in that case, that would be, for example, to do further analysis in the laboratory, have follow-up discussions with the manufacturers to identify, why the accident happened. Then a report will be produced. This report is then submitted to the board. The board is myself, and there are 4 other board members as well. And we take a look at that report. And that leads to a confidential draft report. The confidential draft report is submitted to what we call designated reviewers. So designated reviewers are persons who may be directly affected by the board's findings. So they get a copy of the confidential draft report, and they are able to provide comments on the report. Once we get the comments back, we take them into consideration. We make modifications to the report if required. Then there is a final board review, and then the report is published with any applicable recommendations.
Thank you for that. You mentioned occurrence, accident, and incident. Is there a difference between the 3? Can you just quickly...
Okay, so occurrence is the general term for both accidents and incidents. An accident would be, for example, the occurrence in Toronto, where the aircraft flipped upside down on landing. That would be an accident and a major one. An incident would be an engine failure, an aircraft having an engine failure and having to do an emergency landing at an airport. But there's no damage, no injuries and all that, just engine failure, emergency landing. That would be an incident.
So how do you then work with your stakeholders to encourage the adoption of your recommendations?
So when we issue the recommendation, if the recommendation is issued to a minister, that minister has 90 days to respond, to explain what they will do to address the recommendation. When we get the initial response, we assess it. We give it a rating that can go from unsatisfactory all the way to fully satisfactory. And then on an ongoing basis, we will ask for follow-up information about the status of the recommendation, and then, if required, we will modify our rating. For instance, we can have an initial assessment which shows that the intent is satisfactory, but then a few years later, the department decides not to move ahead with the changes. Then that would affect the rating, and we could downgrade the rating. We are also very engaged with stakeholders, industry associations, and all that. We routinely travel to industry conferences to make sure that we spread our message. We talk to people, and we also get the pulse of what is happening in the field. What are the people seeing in the field?
You mentioned during your, I think in a previous exchange with one of my colleagues, the fact that the Transportation Safety Board is independent and arm's length from the government. Can you talk about why that's important? And please.
Yeah, I'm afraid you haven't left time for a response. The time is up, but maybe you can get back to us in writing for that. We'll now go back to Mr. Barcelo-Duval for 2.5, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My first question for you, if I remember correctly, there was an accident on the 13th of November 2024 in Longueuil, and the Transportation Safety Board sent investigators. One of the confusions that occurred, I think, or the factors was the rails that were used in the triage yard were really old, I think over 100 years old. Do you think that this is something that is widespread across Canada? Second, do you think that has been corrected, at least on that side? For the first part of your question, in the triage yards, it's quite frequent to find very old rails. And the situation in Longueuil is not unique in Canada. For the second part of your question, I would have to check to see whether changes were made. I don't have any detailed information about that aspect of the incident with me here today. I understand that when you investigate and criticize a situation, even if you carry out a report, write up a report, it doesn't necessarily mean that the railways companies have to do anything about it. There was no recommendation associated to the document we published in this case, which was a summary of our going to the site, what we saw on the site. It was a factual report, not that much analysis even, so there were no recommendations made. We simply made note of what we observed on the site. Very well. I find that surprising because it seems that it would only make good sense that very old rails in a railway should be replaced. Perhaps I understand that it's just because the investigation wasn't an in-depth one. There were no recommendations. Is that the reason? Yes, indeed. We went to the site and we drew up a document about what we saw there. It's public, but we did not carry out an in-depth investigation. On the 29th of December last year, there was an accident in the Côte-Nord area, Schefferville area, a train accident. There were, pretty shocking images of it on social networks. And much like for the accident I just put a question to you about in the Kamouraska area about trucks, both were classified as Category 4 accidents, meaning minor accidents. Is the reason why you do that, classify them Level 4, minor, and I understand it can go down to 6, even more minor, but anyway, 4 is relatively minor. That's what it sounds like to me. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it because you haven't the resources to investigate in greater depth? An accident classified Category 4 is not necessarily a minor accident. It's just that based on our evaluation, we feel that the possibilities of making safety more secure in this case or around that issue are not that great.
And Ms. Rochefort, then we'll have two final 4-minute interventions from Conservative and Liberals. Mr. Johns, welcome back. The floor is yours for 5 minutes, please.
Great to be back. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to be back in Mighty Ogo, as you call it. Look, I'm really grateful for the work that you do at the Transportation Safety Board. We've had a number of incidents on the West Coast. I want to highlight those that are affecting marine spills, especially cargo shipping units. We had the Hanjin Seattle spill just a couple of years ago. 2016, off of the coast of Ucluelet. We had the Zim Kingston, as you know, off of Victoria, and each time it's First Nations, local governments, provincial governments, ANGOs and NGOs that are doing the cleanup. There's a jurisdictional quagmire there. We don't have the oil response type of system set up to respond. The Transportation Safety Board has released a report around Zim Kingston. I don't know why they didn't around Hanjin Seattle, and maybe I'm incorrect, but I can't find it. But it cited that the occurrence involving the Zim Kingston demonstrated some of the challenges involving in responding to a marine emergency in Canadian waters. And you also highlighted it raised questions about the availability and capability of Canadian resources. In fact, it cited Canada's preparedness for other types of marine emergencies, such as those involving hazardous and noxious substances, of huge concern. In fact, it cited that Canada doesn't have a plan on how to respond to those occurrences involving the hazardous and noxious substances. So the overall finding that you made was if Canada is not prepared to respond to marine emergencies in Canadian waters, there's a risk that these emergencies won't be managed in a timely and effective manner, endangering vessels, their crew, the environment, and the health and safety of Canadians. And I would add to that the economy, because we rely on the blue economy on the West Coast, and these threats are significant to our food security and our way of life. Is it frustrating when you make these recommendations and you see no changes? And secondly, are you seeing an increase in marine debris spills on the West Coast, given that we've seen obviously more dangerous weather from climate change and, of course, increased traffic at the Port of Vancouver? Maybe you could give some insight on that.
So regarding the first part of your question, so as part of the Zim Kingston investigation, we didn't issue recommendations. We issued what we call a board concern. And a board concern is a way for us to flag a safety deficiency when we have limited information to be able to assess the risk with a certain situation. So in the case of the Kingston, that's what we did. And you're absolutely right that these are the issues that we flagged, which is why a few years later, as part of the we have decided to launch what we call a Class 1 safety issues investigation. So a safety issues investigation basically is a study that we are conducting on emergency preparedness for Canada. We have launched it this summer. It's already well advanced, and basically our goal is to interact with port authorities, with First Nations, with operators, with the regulators to identify, what can be improved in terms of Canada's preparedness for marine emergencies, shipboard fires, and all that. So we're really looking at all of these issues, because in the case of the Kingston, there was a fire on board. So we this accident highlighted these risks, which is why we are looking at it deeper currently.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate that you're saying that you're checking on the pulse of things on the ground, because this is a big issue on the West Coast, and we have the longest coastline in the world, and are hoping that Transport Canada responds. Now, there's been some multiple incidents in Tofino Harbour, and this happens often in rural communities where you've got float planes colliding with marine vessels. We had New Chalmette has been asking for action on this. We've had multiple meetings. We have not seen any changes, and multiple incidents now where people have died and some people have been injured. When you see incidents like this and you're coming back to the same scene in small communities and you don't see action, where is the point where you're independent, you're saying to government, we need action, and you're not getting it? How can you get that message through to Transport Canada?
Yeah, so the traffic around Tofino Harbour and Vancouver Harbour as well, because there is a lot of traffic in that area as well, is something that we are aware of. It is a subject that routinely comes up when we talk with stakeholders. When we go to the West Coast, we speak with people.
We can't even get a meeting with Transport Canada.
It is a subject that a lot of people in the industry are talking to us about, and when it comes up, we will of course flag it through our investigations and identify the potential risks and eventually potentially what can be done to fix it. But it is something.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ms. Washworth, please.
Oui, bonjour. A quick question about the International Civil Aviation Organization. I understand Canada is a signatory to that agreement. So do they ever provide any comments about the work that you do here in Canada?
I'm sorry, just your question is, as the ICAO provided...
Do they ever comment on the quality of your work or the lack of coverage on certain issues? Or?
Well, Canada went through an audit from the International Civil Aviation Authority just a few years ago. As part of that audit, there were a number of items that were identified by ICAO for the state to address. The TSB was part of that audit. We were a small part of that audit, but we were still in it. But for the TSB's point of view, there were really only a few items that we had to address. We ended up with a very high score, which means that we, for the most part, we follow our international obligations when it comes to conducting these air investigations.
Are there many countries that are signatory to this agreement around the world?
The vast majority of them are.
So it speaks well to the Transportation Safety Board, your work, when they provide an audit that is very strong.
For the TSB, we felt we had good results in that audit. There were a few items, but we were able to address them quite easily. So. Yeah.
Myself, I must say, I was impressed with your online strategic plan. I went to look at it, and I was captured by the opening paragraph, and it said, the phone rings in the middle of the night, there's been an accident, and somewhere in Canada, employees of the Transportation Safety Board of Canada get to work. And to answer 3 questions, what happened, as you said, why, and what needs to be done to prevent it from happening again. And then you go on to say that Canadians everywhere can be assured that our organization is strong enough and flexible enough to meet the challenges of the future. Anyway, so overall, I understand that this is a 5-year plan that has now come to this is its last year. So you'll be renewing your strategic plan?
Yes, Actually, we're working on that right now. So we should be able to make it public in the next few weeks. We are actively working on having a new strategic plan that will have identify new issues that we can work on to continue improving.
But we look forward to that. And just to follow on a question of my colleague here, in your work, has there ever been any instances where you've been withheld from carrying out your mandate in any way?
The vast majority of the time, we have no problems. You're referring mostly to field work, how things are working in the field when we interact, when we do the investigation, or
I would say maybe more broadly than that. If someone would say government intervention, in other words.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
We are independent, and I've been chair for a year and a half, and I can say absolutely we have never had any sort of political pressure. We always were able to fulfill our mandate without any interference.
Just a final question, then, with respect to the Act, it is an Act that I guess it dates back to 1994, the Canadian Transportation Accident Investigation and Safety Board Act. In your strategic plan, you had said that you had plans to provide comments with respect to the need to update the Act. What are, in general, some of your thoughts, and what are your plans moving forward on that?
So we have identified a few areas in our Act that could benefit from modernization. As you mentioned, the Act is quite old. It was updated a long time ago. And so we have flagged these potential improvements to our Act to our Minister's office for consideration because we feel that some things can be improved to provide better tools for investigators, to give legal protection for board members. That is an example of things that we are looking at, and this was flagged to our Minister's office for consideration.
For me, it was new to discover the Transportation Safety Board, so I'm delighted by their work and to learn more about it. Thank you very much. Merci.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Mrs. Block for 4, and then Ms. Khalid for 4.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll be following up on some of the questions just previously asked. In 2023, there was a draft report leak from International Civil Aviation Organization, which found multiple lapses in Transport Canada's aviation safety policies. In the audit, as you mentioned, Transportation Safety Board scored an 83%. However, on aircraft operations, Canada scored just 23%. And 67% in personnel training and licensing. What do these numbers say about the state of Transport Canada and the well-being of Canadians when we are provided shockingly terrifying figures like that?
So we, for our part, we took part of the audit that, was about the TSB. So we were not involved in the other parts of the audit. So, I'm not aware of how things unfolded when the ICAO inspectors went to Transport Canada, so I can't really comment on that. But I know for certain that Transport Canada has a number of action items that they are following up on to try to fix the issues that were identified as part of this audit.
Thank you. Among the findings they found to be unsatisfactory were that Transport Canada does not properly monitor aviation companies' fatigue management systems, which are rules that dictate pilots' required rest periods. Have you raised this as an issue as the Transportation Safety Board?
Well, fatigue has been an issue on our watch list for a long time. We have a number of recommendations that are related to fatigue. It is a multimodal issue, which means that it's not only for air, it's also for marine and rail as well. And yeah, definitely, it's been on our radar for a while, and it still is, and probably will be for the near future.
Thank you. Other issues in the audit they found were Transport Canada allows holders of foreign private pilot licenses to convert them to Canadian permits without verifying the license with the foreign authority. That Transport Canada has no formal way of ensuring air traffic controller NAV Canada continuously assesses its shortage of staff and its capacity to handle aircraft, and that pilots and mechanics can obtain medical clearance from foreign doctors who are not subject to Canadian assessments. Have you found similar issues to the ones that ICAO did? And has the government taken any action on them?
Not, from the top of my head, I don't recall investigations in which these issues were raised.
Thank you.
Ms. Khalid, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I'll start by asking about quality and efficiency. Are you, as an organization, leveraging new technologies such as artificial intelligence in how you operate, specifically with respect to quality and delivery of service and efficiency in how you operate?
So finding efficiencies is definitely something that we're working hard on at the moment. With regard specifically to AI, we are currently in the evaluation phase. So we are looking at, what can the opportunities be to use AI. Right now, in the short term, we're looking at really sort of targeted uses. So, for instance, translation can be an example. Using it to produce report summaries can also be a potential option. As for other uses, it would probably be, sometime down the road where we're able to use it more extensively. Or processes that we have internally are already well, it's a well-oiled machine. We have this very, very good methodology that we use to conduct our investigations. It works well. And so we need to continue providing our investigators with the tools that they need to do their job. Recently, we created a new safety analysis tool, which is a tool that our investigators can use basically to analyze an occurrence to identify the findings of that occurrence. So it's a new tool that they are able to use, which makes the analysis more solid and also makes the data about occurrences all easily accessible from one place. So it's an example of modernization that we did recently. So we're continuously looking at opportunities to do things better.
I appreciate that safety analysis tool. I'd love to learn a little bit more about how that impacts your bottom line. So Budget 2025 requires you to reduce your spending by $4.4 million, if I'm correct. So how do you plan on reducing those costs in terms of your operations? And I do want to know more, like how tools like the safety analysis tool impact your bottom line as an operation.
Just a clarification, we were reducing by $1.4 million by 28-29.
So as James mentioned earlier, we are looking at various ways that we can gain some efficiencies in how to streamline our work. We want to improve our timelines for report publication because some reports, as you know, can take a lot of time to be published. And for that, we have to remove bottlenecks. And we also have to find ways to streamline the work by providing our people with additional tools. Obviously, the budget reductions that we are faced with is another opportunity for us to work hard on finding those efficiencies for our people.
Do I still have, no? Okay. No, I'm good. Thank you so much for being here.
Mrs. Block finished early, so we have about 1 minute left. So we'll go to Mr. Barcelot-Duval, seeing he's been such a good guest with us today. Go ahead for 1 minute, sir.
Merci au comité pour votre générosité.
Thank you to the committee for being so generous with me. I would like to pick up again on my question about the ICAO. The airport firefighters seem quite concerned by the lack of personnel at airports, which would make it difficult for them to take control of a plane in fire. Are you concerned by this? You mean specifically, well, the fact that the ICAO standards and numbers of personnel are not being respected in Canada. It's not an issue that has come up via our current investigation, so I can't really comment on that.
for colleagues around the table and anyone watching from home, I recommend you take a look at the Transport Safety Board's website watch list. It's very interesting, frightening at the same time as well, but I highly encourage you. It addresses a lot of what Mr. Marais and Mr. Clarkin were bringing up today, but gives a lot more detail to some of the issues that are facing and that are not being taken care of right now, and it follows up some of the things our block members are bringing up. So thank you again for being with us. I hope we won't have to wait so many years to have you back with us. Just colleagues, very quickly, the upcoming schedule to finish the month. We have the SUPs on Thursday. It's all SUPs all the time with the PBO. The 12th, when we are back, right now we have 1 hour with the PSPC officials. And then we'll see with Minister Lightbound and then also President of the Treasury Board about other dates. Right now, Treasury Board's on the 26th. The 10th and the 12th, we have a bit of open time because of the changing around schedules. We had said we would do 2 2-hour meetings regarding the CER. So I'm suggesting we start filling in some of the blanks around there, but working around the priority of what's the availability for the ministers, because we want to get them. Therefore, it's maybe by Friday at noon, because we'll do 4 1-hour sessions for the CER if you get witnesses to the clerk. And then,
The deadline.
Yeah, Friday
Yeah.
at noon.
I do. Okay.
Sorry, I thought I mentioned Friday at noon. I apologize if I didn't. Yes,
The 10th of
for the CER,
March?
yeah.
Okay.
Because we had 2 for that, and then we'd also, the President of the Treasury Board also agreed to do a separate one for that, but our priority is the estimates. We might still also have an open spot on March 12th, but we'll see about the availability of the ministers. If we do have an open spot, we can bring in the PCO on the SUPs. We haven't had them in for a bit. Another department that is within our orbit that I haven't heard from in a while is Defense Construction. They don't have anything in the SUPs, but they could come in on a briefing and an update for us. But I suggest if it's okay, we'll prioritize the ministers, the CER, and then if we have an open spot, we'll get back. We'll know maybe by Thursday we can talk about whether we want to slot in Defense Construction Agency or PCO. Yep.
Sorry, pardon my ignorance. I know I missed a couple of meetings, but why do we need, is it 4 meetings you said on
No, we'll do
CER?
4 1 hour.
4 1 hours,
So
so
2 meetings. Yep.
Okay, and was that part of which motion that we had?
That was agreed upon by the committee last meeting, or the last time the President of the Treasury Board was here.
Okay, I must have missed it.
Minister, I think he mentioned. Yeah.
So we agreed there was a standalone motion for the minister, the Treasury Board, and then it came up to do 2 meetings on the CER. No, it's not. It's in the blues. So if nothing else, again, thanks for being with us. And again, hope it's not so many years before I have you back here. Thank you again.